That's what's interfering with the... Okay, so give me one of these at the back if it's really difficult to hear me. I should do okay. I have quite a loud grade 5-6 class, so I'm used to sometimes having to really project. My name is Lindsay Bromley, and I'm a public school teacher in the Vancouver School Board. Stand in the middle and do one of these. I recently graduated from my Master's of Education in Language and Literacy, and it was during this time that I started to explore how to use Picturebooks in my classroom to deal with topics that are quite difficult with younger children. And this is my colleague Alexis.
My name is Alexis. Unfortunately, I'm disappointed that there's no podium for me to park my notes on, so I'm going to be wandering around with these. I actually met Lindsay when we were doing our Bachelor of Education degree a couple of years ago now, and we did our practicum at the same school, so we got to know each other very well, and we've remained good friends since then. And I teach grade 2 now. I started teaching in the public system intermediate grades, and now more recently I've been teaching grade 2 at a private school in Vancouver. And a couple of years ago we decided to do our Masters together, and we actually ended up doing our graduating paper together, as Margot said, and it's not cheating. And just ask me that at the table.
So we're here today to talk to you about Picturebooks and how we use Picturebooks informed by a theory that we explored in our academic studies. The theory is called critical literacy. So much literature about it. You could spend an entire day listening to presenters tell you about critical literacy. So we're going to try and sum it up really briefly and then focus on how we have taken this theory and actually done something practical with it in our classroom.
Because we did graduate from the Language and Literacy department, a lot of the things that we learned about were the many ways that teachers use Picturebooks in their classrooms. And then we also learned about this critical literacy theory, and we really felt that it reflected a lot of our own pedagogical goals and pedagogical beliefs. So it sort of expresses how people can read pictures and books and images and critically look at them in more meaningful ways and deconstruct the socially constructed norms that are being presented in them.
So as teachers, we don't see our role as simply standing there in front of our students and relaying facts and information to them. They are very capable with their vast technology skills to search for and find facts and information. What we did find was that our students weren't being very critical with the information that was out there, and with texts and different literature, they were accepting these things in a very passive manner. And so we were kind of in this situation where we knew what we didn't want to do, and we saw what our students were doing, and we were searching for a way to deal with that.
So we, from a critical literacy theory perspective, we recognize that everything is presented in the form of socially constructed norm. And while it's not necessarily right or wrong, we want our students to be aware of them and to recognize that they are being presented to us on a daily basis, and because of that we're probably taking them for granted that they're true, and in some cases they might need to be looked at in a more critical manner. So I want to read a quote to you from Paulo Freire, who's seen as sort of the founding figure of critical literacy theory, and he states that the goal of education should be to develop the student's power to perceive critically in which they exist in the world.
So this approach to teaching, like we've said, is called critical literacy. It's based on recognizing that the world is made up of socially constructed norms, and children can actually be empowered through a style of teaching to question the way they exist in the world and to question what it is that they're reading. So just to give an example that I think many of us come across in our classroom is gender. And we find in our classroom that boys and girls have a very clear notion of what it means to be boys and girls, and these roles are very defined for them. we're looking for a style of education that teaches them to question, well, why do they think the things they do? Where have these ideas come from? And that questioning them is education itself, and giving them the skills to do that on their own.
So among other issues that we find relevant for students to think about, so we do consider gender, for myself especially because I teach in a private all-girls school, so issues around gender come up literally on a daily basis in some form or another. But some other issues might be immigration, multiculturalism, poverty, discrimination, bullying, environmental change. So any of these things, but they have to come from the students in order for deep critical inquiry to occur. So these issues need to be relevant to the students' lives.
So that's, in a nutshell, the theory of critical literacy. We spent a lot of time working with the theory, but we are teachers. So we were left with this challenge of, okay, well, how do we take these lofty ideas of having children question social norms and challenge the world around them? How do we take that and then actually do something with it in our classrooms?
And something that is often asked of me is, well, are you just trying to create a generation of disobedient, challenging students? And it's not that. It really is more getting them to recognize why they believe certain things. And so for us, trying to take this theory and actually implementing it into practice was the challenge. And one of the things that we did was we looked at other teacher researchers that were also trying to implement a critical literacy framework in their classrooms already. Two of the main ones that we looked at were Wendy Morgan and Vivian Vasquez. What was interesting about Vasquez is that she's actually a Canadian elementary school teacher that documents things that happen in her class and then reports it back in the form of case studies. So we found a lot of her information to be especially applicable to us.
So these other teacher researchers were sort of the foundation that we used for the work in our classroom. So we are not reinventing anything, we're just looking at what other people have done and thinking about how will it work in our context. One of the issues that came up a lot in the work we looked at was the idea that texts are not just books. Encouraging children to see texts as posters, websites, commercials, everything out in the world is something that needs to be read. May not be in print, but that children need to take those reading skills or the critical reading and apply them across a variety of texts. So that was quite an enlightening moment for us to realize as teachers that we're not just teaching them how to critically read a book, we're teaching them how to critically read really the world and all the things in their day that they encounter.
And so our idea of using picture books as that sort of stepping stone, it's not the end all just to be able to critically read picture books, but to be able to apply those things to real life text. So we're going to give you an example of what we mean by a real life text. So this is, we Googled advertisements, and this is one that came up on the first page. You probably can't see it very clearly, but it's an advertisement for laundry detergent, and the caption reads, "Every day is Mother's Day." So some of the things that we might want to critically engage or to get our students to think about are, who is this text for? Who made this text? What is the message? How is the woman in this text portrayed? Does this reflect your household? How would you change this text? And whose voice is not heard in this text? So really recognizing what is this social construction being presented to you in this. And again, because advertisements are part of our daily lives, our world is saturated with media, and you are going to see things like this all the time, and you don't even think about it often.
So we're going to share with you some of the work we've done in our classrooms, and as we've mentioned, we focused on using picture books as the tool to start building these skills, asking questions like that with the picture book as our resource. And probably the biggest reason why we chose the picture book was just our love of children's literature, and it was something that is accessible to us. It didn't require any special equipment or knowledge, and it is in all schools. Wherever we were, it was something that we could use again and again. So we just thought it was a perfect place for us to start in a very challenging environment with something that we felt comfortable with, and we think that other teachers as well feel comfortable with Picturebooks.
And not only that, but students are familiar with Picturebooks. This isn't something that they've never encountered before, and a lot of children still love to be read to even when they're older. So in order for us to really facilitate critical discussion, I mentioned earlier that the issues that you decide to raise in your classroom need to be ones that come from the students themselves. And we thought about 3 specific criteria that we're looking for when we're selecting our Picturebooks. So firstly, they need to deal with some kind of social justice issue. So as I mentioned before, this could range from gender to poverty. In my case, gender comes up very often in my all-girls grade 2 classroom, whether it be things that happened on the playground or things that they're doing in the classroom. It does mainly come up around gender issues.
And in my class this year, 24 out of my 29 students are new to Canada. So the issue of immigration and multiculturalism is something that is very relevant to these students. So when looking for Picturebooks, that would be a starting place. We're already having these conversations. It's meaningful to the students, so it fits in with what is already important to them. Picturebooks also are a wonderful tool, and we look for Picturebooks that allow children of all reading levels to get something out of the book. So the second thing that we look for when selecting Picturebooks are Picturebooks that have meaning at a variety of levels, whether it's through the print or the images, whether the child is just learning English or has very advanced reading skills. There's something that all the learners in your class can engage with at whatever reading level they're at.
And the third thing, these are just some of the pictures of the books that we found to be very helpful. The third thing that we look for in our Picturebooks is the fact that they're multimodal. So the idea that the visual tells as much of the story as the actual printed word, and they work together simultaneously in order for real meaning to occur. So Sipe says, the key to understanding what makes a picture book multimodal is the recognition that within a picture book, the print and the visuals work simultaneously to create meaning, with each adding a different element to the overall narrative. I'm sure you understand what I mean by this, but we're going to give you an example anyway. This comes from Anthony Brown's book, Voices in the Park. I'm a huge Anthony Brown fan, and I really feel that he's a master at creating picture books where the reader has to attend both the visual and the print. And so if you were to read this on its own, let me give you some context. There is a mother and her son in the park, and the son has gone missing, and so the mom is looking for him. And so it says, you get some frightful types in the park these days. I called his name for what seemed like ages. And so reading just this alone, you would think, okay, maybe the boy's under some kind of threat, there's some real weirdos in the park, and the mom's feeling like she's in danger. Maybe the mom is quite timid and delicate and can't handle these people. But if you read the picture with the words, you see the mother with her very powerful red hat and her aggressive facial features, and the fact that she takes up the whole frame of the picture, and the way that her voice alone is blasting the trees, that maybe she's the aggressive type in the park that you wouldn't necessarily want to encounter.
So this is an example just of when you're searching for picture books, there are certain picture books that lend themselves better to this style of teaching, and they are ones where children have to be reading visuals as well as the text, and because of that, all range of readers can get something out of these books. So last year, I was teaching grade 3-4, and I was doing a unit on BC First Nations, and I was doing what I had done in the past, and we were researching various elements of First Nations culture, and I thought it was going really well. My students were really enjoying it, and I had one of my students ask me, where are the Aboriginal people now? That's a really good question. From that, another student then asked me, well, where have they gone? Are there Aboriginal people alive in BC anymore? Are they extinct? Wow, okay. So we're learning about the food and various methods of transportation, but I'm not doing something here. I'm missing getting an important message across to my students, and they're looking for more. So I thought, okay, well, what can I do? Because my grade 4 textbook is not going to provide me with the depth that these students are looking for. I am not an expert on these issues. I also don't think me talking at the students, they're really going to get the answers that they want for their really great questions. So I turned to this book, The Rabbits. If anyone is familiar with it, it's an amazing book. It's by John Marsden and Shaun. So we start inquiring into these questions the students have about Aboriginal people. And this story, to give you a quick summary, is a colonization tale of a group of rabbits arriving in a new place. They slowly take over the land from the original inhabitants. The text in the picture book is very, very minimal. Just a couple words or lines per page. And the majority of this story is told through the illustrations. So I use this book as an opportunity to deconstruct the deeper themes of colonization with my students. That's really what they were looking for. That is meaningful to them. And at the same time, I am addressing what is expected in the curriculum. So I read the book to my students. While I'm reading it, we're stopping, we're talking, I'm walking them through the pictures. What do they notice? So we're doing a visual reading and reading the text. Then I gave my students the assignment to create a tableau, so a still scene, 50 years past the end of the book. So we talked about the story, what did they see happening, and I gave them the job of, okay, make a scene that connects to this story, but is 50 years past this book. So before they go off and do that, we start talking about, well, what might happen 50 years later? Whose story was told in this book that might continue? And whose story wasn't told that maybe you could include in your tableau? We talked about what perspective you might want to represent, that this story has multiple perspectives. It's not just the story of a group of people coming and taking over this land. There's the history of those people and why have they come there. The history generationally of, well, what happens next to the children of the people who are being taken over. So it's really meaty. It gives them a lot to think about when they're having to look forward into the future of an issue. Someone brought up about, one of the kids, about they didn't use the word technology, but about the weapons that the rabbits had, and in their tableau, they represented even that continuation of technology and how that affects the story. So I'm encouraging the students to question what's going on in the book and to infer both sides of the story. And it's not a simple cut and dry, the rabbits were wrong for taking over the land and the other group of people are the victims. That there is a very complicated story here. There are no right and wrong answers, but they're thinking on a very deep level for a grade 3-4 class. And they have to then think beyond the context of the book. When they're asked to think about 50 years into the future, they're taking what's in the book and they're now applying it to, okay, well, 50 years past this book, you're now beyond the textbook or the picture book, and they're thinking about, well, how does this apply to life, and what do I already know about a similar story to this that I might show in my tableau. So it was really interesting to see how certain children did this tableau. Some of them drew on what they knew was going on in the world and created a scene where a peace treaty was made. Some of them had the rabbits feeling all this guilt and giving back land to the original inhabitants. And I mean, they are reflecting things that are actually happening in the world. After the tableaus, the conversation we had is, well, why did you reflect 50 years later the way you did? Where did you get these ideas from? Because they didn't come from nowhere. You've been influenced somewhere to think the way you do. And then, so the kids start thinking, okay, well, I remember seeing in the news about in another country, I know that these groups are fighting and they tried to make a peace treaty, but it didn't work because no one can get along. So we're connecting it as much as we can to the wider world. The next activity we did was a writing and role activity. So students were asked to take on the point of view of either the conquering rabbits, who would write to one of the original inhabitants, or vice versa. They would take on the role as one of the original inhabitants and write to one of the rabbits. So in this activity, the students, again, are really thinking about critical questions and looking at a problem from multiple perspectives. So here's one of the letters that one of my students said, "Dear people of this country." So he is taking on the point of view of one of the conquering people, writing the other side. Why do you live in a tree? Because it's fun, convenient, easy to live in. I wonder what you eat. We are taking your kids and your community because we don't have enough resources and food back where we live. We feel sort of bad for you people, but it's for your own good. So it's you know, quite a simple child's perspective on a really complex topic. And I see that this child has moved his thinking beyond the colonization story of this is right or this is wrong to really looking at it, well, okay, what are more issues and questioning why might this have happened? So these two activities, the grade 3-4s, they're looking into themes of colonization, they're looking into power hierarchies, you know, who is able to come and actually have control over another group of people. They're looking at the issue from multiple viewpoints. They're questioning their own understanding of the world. Where do I get these ideas that I have? And at the same time, they're using really complex reading skills. I didn't ask any comprehension questions, but they had to understand the story in order to come up with these ideas, to work in a group, to create a scene. So the questioning we're doing is not who, what, where, why, when. It's why is this book written? What's the point? What's the story here? So we're encouraging the reading skills, but from a different approach.
So as I mentioned, I teach at an all-girls school, and topics about gender come up quite frequently. Sometimes my students don't even realize this. But last year we were in our readers workshop class, we were practicing making inferences, so inferring that good readers infer clues and meaning from pictures and words that the author's leaving them. So I started one of my lessons by reading the picture book Leaf. It's a wordless picture book, so we were going through the book and we were making inferences from just the illustrations. And throughout the book is about a child that finds a seed and eventually the seed turns into a tree. So the girls were making inferences throughout as we were reading it, and they were all inferring this child is a girl. And then when you get to the end of the story, you realize actually the child grows up to be a man, and that it wasn't a girl the entire time, it was a boy. And so I asked them, well, what clues did the author leave to make you think that this child was a girl and not a boy? And in their words, because boys don't have long hair and girls are more into gardening. And so this made me think, and I probed a little bit further, well, can girls have short hair then if boys can't have long hair? And do you know any boys with long hair? And where do you get these ideas from that girls should have long hair and boys should have short hair? Because our principal has short hair and she's a woman. And so they really were sort of thinking about this. And this lesson really helped you springboard into a lesson that really addressed gender inquiry more. And I used the book 10,000 Dresses. It's by Marcus Ewart and illustrated by Rex Ray. And so the story is about a child named Bailey, and Bailey dreams about beautiful dresses. Bailey is actually biologically a boy, but identifies more as a girl. And so Bailey shares these dreams that she has about the dresses, and her family doesn't support her in this, and this really weighs on Bailey throughout the story. And going into a book like this is really just about recognizing the social constructions society has created about the dichotomy between boys and girls, and really what it means to be a boy or a girl, and that it isn't quite as black and white as we sometimes think that it is. And so this book, I chose it because I knew that it would challenge their understanding of what it meant to be a boy or a girl, and how did that fit into their understanding, and how didn't it? So the next day, we continued with our Reader's Workshop activity of inferring. And we did something called an OWI chart. So O, they're presented with a picture, and based on the picture, O, what do they observe? They write down some things that they observed, some things that they know to be fact. W, what do they wonder? So what are some questions they have about that same picture? And then I, what can they infer? So not what they know for sure, but based on the clues in the picture, what are some logical inferences that they can make from it? And I was handing out the papers, and literally before I handed out all of the papers, the kids were asking, is this a boy or a girl? And it was really important for them to know if this was a boy or a girl before they could move on to the activity. The other questions that they were asking, a lot of the girls thought that a lot of my students thought that this was a girl. And they said, well, where is her hair? Is her hair in a bun? Does she have cancer? Can I draw hair on her? And this, I didn't even need to go to the topic of gender. They went to this issue on their own before I handed out the papers and explained what the activity was. And so I said to them, well, I'm going to leave that up to you. They've done an OWI chart before, so they know what they're supposed to do, but they've never encountered a picture like this. So this, for them, was quite challenging. Unfortunately, you can't see some of the writing, but a lot of the inferences were that this is a girl, that the child is crazy for wearing a dress. So then what I did after this OWI chart, I read them the story, and it starts something like this. Bailey is sleeping, Bailey has these wonderful dreams, she is dreaming about dresses and her dresses, and so as I was reading this, my students were saying, oh, it's a girl, okay, I knew it was a girl. And then the story continues. Bailey wakes up the next day, goes to her mother and says, Mom, I had dreams about these beautiful dresses. And then the mother says, Bailey, what are you talking about? You're a boy. Boys don't wear dresses. At which point my students are like, huh? And so I said, well, why are you confused? Why do you think the author would say she when Bailey's a boy? And so there was a bit of discussion about this, and one of the girls raised her hand, and I found this to be a very profound statement by a 7-year-old. But she said that maybe the author wrote she, and these are her exact words, because the author wants us to know how much Bailey feels like a girl. And I thought, exactly, this is what this is all about, recognizing that it's not just the split between boy and girl, and you can pigeonhole what it means to be a boy or a girl, but it's a much grayer line than that. Another activity that we did the following day, it's called Writing on the Wall. And the idea with this, just like with Lindsay's writing and role, is to recognize the different perspectives. So we talked about how did Bailey's parents, specifically the dad, how did they get these ideas that boys shouldn't be wearing dresses? Like, where did these ideas come from? They didn't come from nowhere. And so doing a writing on the wall activity, I put 2 silhouettes up, and each silhouette out of chart paper was meant to represent either Bailey or the father. And as I read the story, I got the students to come up and write down some emotions they thought that the different characters would be feeling. And then we addressed some of the things that they wrote about the father. And I said, you know, like, where did he get these ideas from? Why does he not necessarily want Bailey to be wearing dresses or to be thinking about dresses. Some of their comments were, he's embarrassed because he thinks boys shouldn't be wearing dresses. But I have a friend who's a boy and he likes pink, and that's sort of the same thing. So again, for a 7-year-old, trying to make these connections and trying to make sense of this. He wants his son to grow up big and strong, and he wants his son to believe girls are weak. He wants girls to like his son, and they won't if he wears dresses. And maybe he's worried, and he wants to protect his son because he doesn't want him to get bullied when he's older. So again, it's not necessarily about being right or wrong, but just recognizing that there are different perspectives and there are social constructions being presented to you all the time. And it's just important to be aware of them, that it's not as simple as saying the father's the bad guy and we have to feel bad for Bailey.
So, sort of sum up, we feel that whatever the issue is in your curriculum that you're looking at, or whatever comes up in your classroom, that's the starting point to find some really great picture books and use that to stimulate relevant discussion through critical questioning, really meaningful activities that have kids thinking deeper into the themes of the book and those themes and how they connect to the outside world. The teacher's role in this is to model and guide your students through that process and that act of asking critical questions, and to help them grapple with these very difficult topics while not leading them to one viewpoint or another, but to just open up that discussion that, yes, school is the place to be talking about multiple viewpoints, not right or wrong answers, and the things that go on in the outside world and in your students' own lives should be brought into the classroom and dealt with in a meaningful way. Once children become more familiar with this sort of inquiry approach to a picture book, it's our hope that they'll start questioning the things they read on their own, the things they read in all texts out there in the world, whether it's happening on TV or if it's a picture that they see. They'll start asking the same kind of questions that you practice in your classroom, like who is making this text? Why? What's the point of it? How does it connect to my life? Is it the way my life is, or is it not?
Yeah, so it's really about using the picture books as a tool within the classroom, and our hopes are that they'll be able to apply these questions on their own to the outside world. Lindsay and I have recently started a blog. It's called Inquiry to Education, and we've got information about the different books that we've used on there, and